right, hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the upcoming lockdowns that start today in Austria. We're also going to be talking about the disappearance of a Chinese tennis star, and I'll touch a little bit on the Rittenhouse case, which begins its closing statements today. All right, let's get started. So, regarding the Australian lockdowns, these are only for Austrian people who are not vaccinated. Obviously, there's a lot of issues there. You can also be exempt from these lockdowns if you have recently recovered. Essentially, those who can prove that they are either fully vaccinated or have been immune from a recent past infection are the only ones who are allowed to leave their homes for non-essential reasons. Those who are unvaccinated are only allowed to leave their homes for essential purposes, kind of going along with this, such as going to a doctor or going grocery shopping, etc. Officials have also said that they will be increasing police patrols to enforce these rules, and you will be fined if you're caught breaking this. This is going to start for 10 days. I would not be surprised at all if they extend it. I hope they don't, certainly, but I would not be surprised at all if they continue to extend it. This is just, it's kind of unreal. Essentially, they're saying we're going to lock up 1/3 of the population and say you are not allowed to leave your home unless you get this medical procedure done. You're not allowed to visit hairdressers, cinemas, anything like that. They were already barred from doing those things initially, but now you're straight up not allowed to leave your house other than essential purposes. Obviously, there's a ton of issues with this. First of all, it's a common fact acknowledged by everyone, including vaccine manufacturers, that even vaccinated people can still catch this disease and can still spread this disease. What is a lockdown for only unvaccinated people going to do? I'm sure a lot of people are coming at this angle saying, well, we're doing it to protect them. Well, we're doing this for their own good. If you have not gotten vaccinated by this point yet, pretty much everyone in first world countries has had the ability to get vaccinated if they wanted to. It should be their choice. Obviously, a lot of these countries have different rules, laws, and regulations than the U.S. does, but at least here in the U.S., it's your choice if you want to get a certain medical procedure done. And at this point, anyone who wants to be vaccinated has been vaccinated. You've had ample opportunity in the majority of Western countries. And clearly, the people who have not gotten vaccinated have not gotten vaccinated for an explicit purpose, whether that be because they don't want to take the risk, whether that be because they have a certain health condition that prohibits them from doing that. It's their choice, and measures like these are explicitly done to force these people who are still resisting to comply and to get this vaccine. Now, I'm not going to get into all the specifics of the vaccine and whether or not it's a good choice to get it or not, but frankly, this is scary. This is a scary step. We've seen what's been going on in Australia with their insane lockdowns. You're literally not allowed to work if you don't have the vaccine in Australia for the most part. They've been in lockdown for a long time. Recently, they've been somewhat lifted for vaccinated people, but we're seeing this trend of increased authoritarianism begin to spread, and now it's in Austria as well. Again, I would expect things to get more and more severe in Western countries for people who are unvaccinated, and even maybe people who are vaccinated. I would expect these authoritarian pushes to increase in severity gradually, and just know that whether or not this is a big collusion, I don't want to get super conspiracy theory on you guys, but world leaders are watching this, and they're watching how the citizens of these countries with extreme COVID measures are behaving. Are they complying? Is there a lot of pushback, or is there just a little bit of pushback, but the large majority is complying? They're taking this into account. They're taking note of this, and expect this to come to other Western countries. We've seen it, and things are just ramping up. This is the time, if you're living in one of these countries, or if you're living essentially in any country that's pushing COVID restrictions, this is the time to stand up, because tomorrow you straight up might not be able to without severe repercussions. Even then, I would encourage people to stand up, but it's getting scary. And as curious as I am to see where this leads, we can sort of, trace the trail to see where it's going to end up. it's a scary time. We're living in a scary time, and hopefully all these countries, including the US, can come out with their government structure somewhat intact, at least, and not full authoritarian. All right, moving on to our next story. This is Peng Shuai. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. She is a women's tennis star. She actually was ranked at the height of her career 14th in the world, and she was number 1 in doubles, and she won a Grand Slam title in doubles. So very high level tennis player. She, on November 2nd, went to the Chinese version of Twitter, which is called Weibo, and made a sexual abuse allegation against the former vice premier of China. So obviously a very high level former government official. She made sexual assault allegations against him, and there's a growing movement in China right now for sort of a Me Too-esque movement to out sexual abuse and, to bring it to light. Hopefully consequences will happen. Again, this was November 2nd on the Chinese version of Twitter, and within 20 minutes, the post was taken down. Now, once I heard about this news when it came out, and I saw a lot of people sort of half joking, sort of, a little bit nervous that, oh my gosh, she's going to be disappeared. Oh boy, she might commit suicide soon in the near future. This was sort of a joke, but at least for me, I was a little bit nervous, I believe I did read that she did at least reside in Florida. Hopefully, we were hoping, hopefully that provides her a little bit of extra protection. But we did see China, again, the post was taken down within 20 minutes. Keywords like tennis or relating terms were completely blocked and wiped, and subsequent posts were also taken down from China's internet. Well, maybe those jokes weren't a good idea, because since that post was made, she has not been publicly heard from since. I'll just leave that out there. She's essentially disappeared. Now, look, maybe she'll magically reappear in a few days, but at the time of this story, she has essentially gone missing. No one has heard from her. We don't know where she is. You connect the dots here, because it's very clear to me that likely China did not want this sort of publicity, and they took action. Let's just say that. Look, the WTA, which is the Women's Tennis Association, so for professional tennis players, has called for a full, fair, and transparent investigation, to quote them, by the Chinese government for this. But look, as unfortunate as it is, I'm not expecting a whole lot to come from this. Maybe she'll make like a surprise appearance or something to get the press off of the Chinese government's back or something like that. But there's over $1 billion of Chinese funds into the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association. They are a major funder of this organization. They have a bunch of tournaments, a bunch of different tennis tournaments in their nation. We know how involved China is in all these different sports, in all these different organizations, and that's why they really don't receive a whole lot of pushback from governments and from just general bodies of people. It's because they're so involved. They're a major part of this. We know they're super involved in the NBA. We know they're super involved in really pretty much any major organization they have a hand in, or they're not exposed to have a hand in yet, but they probably do. Let's be honest. We know that there are so many human rights abuses going on in China, and they're ignored. They're not called out because of things like funding, and because we don't want to push them too much, because, well, they might attack Taiwan. They might continue to push on Hong Kong. I mean, look, we know about the Uyghurs. We know, all these climate activists like to funnily ignore the fact that China is by far the world's largest polluter. And look, it's scary. It's really eerie, and I would like governments to make a more formal stance and say, this is not right. China, you need to stop. We will push back on you. But we know they won't. The U.S., our government is just, our military rather, is just we would probably lose a war with China if we were to start one. Maybe our Navy could take them. We do have a very good Navy, but pretty much everything else, not great. I'm just going to kind of leave that there. I would definitely be keeping an eye on this story to see what happens. I'm hoping that more attention is drawn to it so that China is forced to, in some way, have a response to this. But I'm honestly not expecting much to come from this. It's very sad. It's very tragic. We'll see where it goes. I'll definitely be keeping my eye on this. I am somewhat of a tennis fan. I do like to watch a lot of the different tournaments they have because I think it's very interesting. Although I've never played, so there's that. But yeah, let's move on. Finally, Rittenhouse's closing statements. The closing statements for the Rittenhouse murder trial are going to begin today. I'm somewhat nervous for this. I know that it's extremely clear what the correct verdict should be. If you have watched the video of the events taking place, you know what the correct verdict should be here. You know. I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to take a look so that they really get a full picture of the case, because there's been a lot of straight up lies by the media. There's been a lot of, to quote the popular term, there's been a lot of misinformation. But frankly, anyone who watches that footage and tells me Rittenhouse should be in jail has either not seen the footage or is intentionally pushing a specific agenda. And they've decided that Rittenhouse has to be the one who's punished in order to push this agenda, frankly. I've been watching CNN clips every so often just to see, what do they have to say about this a year after the actual events occurred. I've seen straight up lies or intentionally, well, I shouldn't say intentionally because I can't assume intention, but I've seen ways that phrases are sort of twisted to imply things that are not actually accurate to the case. And look, I'm nervous, especially after the Chauvin verdict. In my opinion, maybe you could have gotten Chauvin on a manslaughter charge, maybe, but even that, I think there's enough reasonable doubt that he should have walked away. He should have straight up walked away. He should have no charges. And yet they somehow decided that, yes, he premeditated this. He intentionally did this. He was planning this ahead of time. Obviously, that's not what happens. As tragic as that story was, or that incident was, Chauvin should have walked away without any charges on that. Hopefully they'll have a retrial and it will get reversed. Again, we'll see where that goes, but this is maybe a bit pessimistic towards this trial. As obvious as the verdict should be, Rittenhouse was clearly defending himself. He was obviously defending himself. If you were to watch the video, you would see that he was not an active shooter. It was really, he was being targeted by a group of people, and he was able to defend himself successfully from those people, although it's not like he came away scot-free. He got hit in the neck. Obviously, he's, I'm sure, going to have a lot of PTSD from this, I would assume, especially after the reaction we saw when he was on the stand. But another reason I'm very nervous about this is because BLM has made a formal statement saying, we know who the jurors are. There's been efforts to photograph their faces and dox them to pressure them. One can fairly assume to give a guilty verdict to Rittenhouse. Again, really, this shows the real division that the U.S. is experiencing right now, because a certain portion of the country says, this is so obvious, he's not guilty, he was defending himself. And the other half says, are you kidding me? This is an active shooter. He went there with the intent to kill people. He should be put in prison for the rest of his life. And I've seen posts on Twitter straight up saying, if any person comes to you with these arguments on the Rittenhouse case, straight up walk away. They're not worth your time. Clearly they're racist, etc., etc., etc. How is this unifying? How is this unifying? I thought we were supposed to come together, a la Joe Biden's inaugural speech. It's not really happening here. Anyway, this really is everyone's right to self-defense on the line, because if Rittenhouse is called guilty here, holy crap. Anytime you try to defend yourself, you're going to jail. You're going to jail. This marks the continuation or the end of your right to self-defense. We know in a lot of legal cases, they use the precedent from similar former cases to help determine the verdicts. This is especially true with Supreme Court cases. But straight up, this is your right to self-defense on the line. I'm really hoping the jury is not intimidated. Luckily, it's possible they could get a mistrial with prejudice, which would mean that Rittenhouse goes away scot-free. They can't retry him. I think there's an argument for that, to be honest, but I am not a legal expert. And I think I did see somewhere that the judge may have power to override the jury's decision. I'm not sure about that last one, but I would look into that a little bit more. I'll see if I can make any other announcements regarding that. But again, all eyes in the country are on this case right now. Very nervous about the verdict. Really hoping that Kyle can walk away from this. Hopefully the jury is able to stand their ground and not just placate to the mob's wishes. Luckily it is, I know in the upper Midwest they got a lot of snow recently, so I think the cold weather is going to probably dampen down the riots a little bit, because we know summer's riot season because it's warm. Hopefully the cold weather will deter some rioting, but I know that the situation there is getting a little bit crazy, but we'll see how it goes. I would really just keep your eyes on this story and the stories that I mentioned earlier, and make sure to have a good day.